Okay, so next on the list of factors is climate. So yeah, you're going to want to know at a high level whether it's going to be hot or cold, obviously, and then that's, maybe you want to go skiing, so you need to know if it's going to be cold, or yeah, maybe you really hate the cold and you want to make sure you're not going to be cold in the winter, if it is winter that you're traveling in. So yeah, obviously hot or cold is the most obvious thing, but then there's seasonality as well, and the seasons obviously differ um, in different parts of the world at different times of year. And one of the things that maybe you've never had to consider before is monsoon seasons, which actually vary quite a lot, even in the same country. For example, in Thailand, in Koh Phangan, the monsoon season is basically only a month, and it's about October, November, yeah, basically November time. Whereas in Koh Lanta in Thailand, which is the same country, it's the whole of summer is a total write-off until, so it's something like June until September is a huge monsoon season, and you can't live on Koh Lanta at that time. So yeah, so there's different factors that you have to consider. But anyway, let's jump into the resources that I can share with you to research climate and weather. So yeah, first our favorite website, Nomad List. The relevant data we have here, if we go to all filters on the left here, so at the top you can see there's some high level stuff. So is it warm now? And then it filters by places that are warm now. So there's a really quick way. But then if you go further down, you can go, there's actually a climate section here. So do you want to go somewhere tropical? Do you want to go somewhere where there's a desert? Do you want to go somewhere temperate? So yeah, kind of mild, and yeah, kind of like a traditional, I guess, yeah, east coast of the US, kind of European climate, where it's rainy in the spring and the autumn, and maybe it snows in the winter, and then it's hot in the summer. So this is a really good way. Do you want temperate climate? And you can see what comes up here. Yeah, so this is good kind of generally. Do you want to go somewhere tropical? Make sure you unselect the other option. So these are all tropical places. So that's kind of at a high level, but then if you've got a specific place in mind, you can see, you can click on the specific location, and then it has a weather tab for that location. So you can see here, yeah, it's a bit of an eyeful of data and numbers, but you can see here the information. So one thing to know about Canggu, Bali is that a lot of the year it feels really hot. So the difference between what it feels like and feels is the top one, real is the actual temperature is the second one, is basically the humidity actually. And this actually, knowing Canggu very well, having spent a lot of time there, the humidity here doesn't really do it justice, considering it says it's the same humidity the whole time. But certainly this does do it justice, what it feels like. So in January, Feb, March, April, May, maybe May it starts to get a bit better. It feels really, really hot and humid. And then the Northern Hemisphere summer months, it feels much cooler. And okay, it's still hot. But yeah, it's bearable at that level. And then you can see here another really important thing for a lot of people is rain. So you can see here that Bali has a wet season and a dry season, which is very common in Asia. So December, January, February, March, April, it's wet. And actually, again, knowing Bali, it's December, January, February, it is really wet, and then it starts to get less wet. And then in the summer months, June, July, August, September, it's dry. I'm not sure what's happening in June here. I don't think that's actually the case. Maybe there's an error. And again, this is an issue with Nomad List, that it's not 100% accurate, and you don't know what the numbers are, like how they're being informed here. And again, cloud is another interesting one. So you can see in December and January and February and March, it's pretty cloudy. Again, not really true, because most of the day it's blue skies, and then there'll be like an afternoon where it's like thunderstorms and torrential rain. So it's hard just from the numbers to know exactly what it's like on the ground. But at least as a starting point, this is a really good indication of at least temperatures. You know what it's going to be like temperature-wise in the location that you're going to. So yeah, that is Nomad List. Next, Facebook groups. Again, I introduced you to these earlier. Let me show you how to use these. Facebook. So it's exactly the same way that we searched in terms of safety. We can search in terms of weather. Let's go to the same one we went to before. And you can see, yeah, so you can do the same, similar kind of searches. So weather in, let's say, June. So let's search weather in June. Let's see if we can find anything relevant. We can search here. Maybe we want to get out of 2020 because it's a bit of a weird year in terms of posts. Okay, not an awful lot for weather in June. What about if we search humid? No results. Let me see if we search weather in general. Okay, so you can see here, at least there's something, weather permitting. So I know in November it's basically the hurricane season in Mexico. Escape the hot weather. So this is an insight, right? So if you're looking to escape the hot weather in Riviera Maya, which is where the Playa del Carmen is, so that was posted in July 2020. So obviously it's really hot there. And if we cross-reference this with Nomad List, we'll see that yes, it is. Oh, let's find out. Playa del Carmen. Weather. Yeah, July, 43 degrees. So yeah, for the Americans among you, this is 40 degrees Celsius, which is well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So very, very hot in July. But yeah, not always fruitful. It does depend on the groups and how many posts there are. But it can be a good place to find kind of more qualitative personal accounts of weather. But really, I think the best one here is Google. So if you simply search on Google, weather in Playa del Carmen in October, okay, you get kind of high level information, but then if you go for the best times to visit Playa del Carmen, and then you get like a real actual description of the situation. June to September, hurricane specials. and this is the off season. October to March, hurricane season ends. So that, I think, really is the best way to find kind of longer descriptions of what the climate's going to be like in a location. And also high and low seasons. Usually tourist seasons are factored around the weather. So if you go like low season in Koh Lanta, which is a place in Thailand that we often go, Koh Lanta low, so TripAdvisor has a lot of forums that have a lot of really great information in from travelers. So Koh Lanta low season experience is my third. Anyway, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but this is a recount of someone's experience in low season in Koh Lanta. Do they say when low season is? I'm not sure. Okay, well, let's try. Let's go. When is low season in Koh Lanta? May and October. It's fair to say that Koh Lanta shuts down. So yeah, really great information just from Google. And also it's worth bearing in mind when it comes to low seasons, that it affects accommodation prices a lot. So maybe you don't, as we just saw, Koh Lanta shuts down in low season. Maybe you don't want to go in kind of the depths of low season, but if you pick the month before low season starts and the month after low season ends, or that kind of shoulder season, you can get really great deals on accommodation while still having good enough weather that it's worth going. Like you can get discounts of up to 50% on the rate that you would get during the high season, just because there's not many tourists there. So that's worth bearing in mind. Okay, there's a trade-off, of course, that maybe weather isn't going to be so great the whole time, or maybe you get lucky and it's perfect weather for that whole month that you're there, even though it's a shoulder season. But that's definitely something that you should look into. When are the high and low seasons in a location? And finally, you should check the daylight hours in a place. Again, if you haven't traveled a lot, maybe you're not so aware of how this differs, but basically the closer you are to the equator, the more stable daylight hours are. So basically in Thailand, for example, during the year, the time that the sun rises and sets doesn't change by much at all. I think it might be 30 minutes either way, depending on what time of year it is. Whereas if you go to further away from the equator, it changes a lot. So if you go to like Argentina, that's a bit further south. So if you go at the wrong time of year, you might have really few daylight hours. Or you go somewhere, maybe you're not going to go to these places because they're really expensive places to visit. But if you go somewhere like Sweden, it's during the winter, they have maybe 6 hours of sunlight a day, maybe even less in some places in Sweden, which isn't that fun to go visit in the winter. Yeah, it's a lot of darkness. So that's worth bearing in mind as well. Just check. If you're planning to go somewhere at a certain time of year, check daylight hours. So daylight hours in Lisbon, let's say, in December, just as an example. Timebee.com. Let's see what Timebee says. So we can see there it's giving us the time that the sun sets, which is a good starting point. But yeah, then it tells you the daylight hours for each day, in fact. And then if we go to June, 14 hours. So that can actually make a big impact on your experience in a place. Of course, this is generally awesome to have 15 hours of daylight every day. rather than going in the depths of the winter and only having 6 or 9, obviously depending on where you go. But yeah, that's definitely worth bearing in mind. So yeah, that's all I've got for you for climate. I think Google is really your main nomad list, and then just Googling and trying to find forums actually that people have posted in, and just playing with your Google search terms and finding more kind of recounts of people's experiences in that place at a certain time of year, rather than just looking at numbers, because somewhere that might be 30 degrees and another place that's 30 degrees may feel totally different, and maybe a totally different experience, depending on humidity or rainfall or cloud cover. There's so many things that go into it. So it's much better to find kind of detailed descriptions of people's experiences in those places. So yeah, that's climate.